Today is November 16th, 2025, and this is Rachel Tillman with the Viking Mars Missions Education and Preservation Project. And I have the great pleasure of sitting here with Eliya Pelton, a student who I've enjoyed working with for the past few years. And so, Eliya, would you like to introduce people first by telling them where you're located roughly? Of course, no home addresses or anything. And what you are, where you're working and what you're doing right at this moment.
Yeah. Um, right now I'm working at the Aerospace Corporation. They have a few locations. I'm in the Southern California location at El Segundo. And I'm working on a software development team, making modeling and simulation software tools.
Very, very cool. And we're going to delve into that because, geekdom rules and having a computer background, I want to hear all about what you're doing. But but I'd love to hear what your journey has been because I know there's a lot of students out there that are just in the last few years of college trying to figure out what they're going to do. And you've now been through that first phase of launch
Mhm.
from ideation, and you've done a lot of planning and a lot of pre-work. And we've done some work together. And so I think it's really helpful for students to hear from you in your early phases of this, when you're really close to your brand new situation, what that was like for you. And let's maybe start a little bit before that at your inspiration. What was your inspiration to go into aerospace? What are some of the things that made you go, oh, yeah, I want to do that?
Yeah. I think as far as my inspiration, I think it's different than what I hear a lot of other people who I talk to, other students my age who, or not my age, but my stage of going from college, finishing studies, going into work. A lot of them knew from a very young age that they were really, really passionate about space. And I think that's something that I discovered in college. I started at a community college and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I loved math. So I was doing my associates in math. And through that, I met someone who was a part of the engineering club at my community college. And she invited me to join. She was like, it's a great opportunity. You can put it on your resume, learn lots of things, get connected to people. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And then someone in the engineering club told me about a NASA program for community college students. It's NCAS. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's for community college students. And I thought, I probably won't get in because it's related to NASA, and that means you have to be so smart. And so I probably won't get in, but why not apply? The worst that can happen is that they say no. So I applied and I got in, and it was online because it was around the COVID era. And so everything was still online. And I really loved it. It was one of the most fun and challenging things I had done at the same time, and I learned so much from it. Um, and that from from that experience, I met other people who told me about another NASA program. They're like, well, if you liked this one, there's another one, and it was open to any college student. So even if you're not at a community college, it's called L Space. And they have two different academies you can do. One of them is only undergrad students, the other one is also open to graduate students. Um, and I recommend it. Both of the programs were great. So I did that one, and it was very similar, also online. And both of these are free, by the way, so that's not an obstacle. It is competitive, so you do still have to apply and have references, but it is free if you get in. And those two experiences, I believe, were the two biggest contributors for me getting my first internship. Um, because you can do really, really well. I always had a 4.0 GPA, but a lot of people have that. And even if they don't have that, they have experience, which is so much more valuable. So if you don't have a 4.0 GPA, that's totally fine. If you have things that show that you want to learn, I think that that's what people care about a lot more. Um, so I think that it was through these programs that I learned what can happen in the aerospace industry, what people are doing, the work that's being done. And I think it was a very gradual um, exposure to it that made me want to keep going in that direction.
That's a really, really great answer, and for sharing both of those programs. So everybody listening, the National NSA, right?
NC, NCAS, or
NCAS. Okay. We'll look that one up and we'll put it in the link so that we can get more
okay,
information to people.
yeah.
So, and the LSpace
Mhm.
program are both really great programs. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that they're free because I know for a lot of students that that's a barrier.
Yeah,
In the drive around the country that I did, I met so many young people that wanted to go into space and wanted to do the education and wanted to learn more, but the finances were a barrier for them. Now, has that ever been something that was a barrier for you, or that made you ever think, "Gosh, maybe I can't get that"? Whether it was, graduate, undergraduate, your next, your PhD, whatever's coming
yeah,
next.
yeah. It was definitely, I'd say that it was the biggest challenge. If anything was going to block me, it would have just been finances. Um, but I didn't really see that as a blocker because I didn't mind how long it would take. For me, I spent 7 years to finish college, and it was because I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford to help with anything. I'm the youngest of six kids, so there are a lot of us, and they couldn't help any of us with college. But what they could do was give me free rent, and that helped so much. So I was able to live with them, save money. I got a job the day after my high school graduation and started going to community college while I was still in high school. So I was getting my GE done. Um, I got financial aid at my community college and scholarships. And so I was working, going to school for free, and actually getting paid through scholarships. And I know that a lot of people there's a bit of a stigma on community college. I personally love it and I would recommend it to anybody. I think it's such a wise way, especially if you don't have the money available. Um, it's I don't see
No
any reason
downside.
not to do it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was very high quality education, um, and just great professors. Some of my favorite professors were from my community college. So yeah, I would recommend it. But yeah, it was. I spent a few years at community college saving up, and then when I transferred to my 4 year, I continued to work, and that was really what made me able to do it.
Yeah, and you've touched upon, as you know, I'm a little privy to, you've touched upon two really great points. One of which is that a degree does not have to be done in 4 years. And I think that's a huge misconception that stops a lot of people. And I think also a lot of parents put that pressure on their kids. You've got to graduate within 4 years and get a job and, enter the workforce, yada, yada, yada. So that's great that you were able to navigate that in the time that you needed to navigate it with the resources you had. So that's pretty awesome. And thank you for mentioning that. And the other thing is exactly that. The community colleges have really, really great resources. And if there's one thing that makes you love your community college teachers, can you describe kind of one of those things it is that really made you appreciate them and enjoy them?
They were definitely there because they loved what they were teaching. I think that's the biggest difference between. I don't think I had any community college professor who didn't seem like they just absolutely loved what they were teaching, and that's why they were there. And I think some other professors, maybe they're there more because that's just a good place to be rather than they just love the material. Um, and it really changes the enthusiasm that they have, and that changes my enthusiasm when I'm learning. And I think that professors who just are in love with their subject are also more willing to help students understand it. They're more willing to find new ways of teaching. They may present it in one way that a lot of students understand, and there might be some other students who learn a different way, and they'll take a different approach. They'll say, well, think of it this way, and they just love the subject so much that they can think about it in lots of different ways. And I think that's helpful for
Yeah.
having lots of diverse students.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you touch upon something that crosses a threshold that I think is really important for students to know exists out in the world as they're beginning their journeys, or wherever they are in their journey when they're listening to this, is that adults can be quite pedantic, meaning they can say things that are filled with confidence and even facts, you know, but in such a way that it really makes those receiving those comments feel less than. And I think
Mhm.
when all of us are communicating with someone like that, whether it's just a human, a boss, a teacher, it can be very discouraging. So having an environment like you're describing, where the teachers are so passionate about what it is, what the subject matter is, that they're flexible, it's really that difference between a lecture where the words are going to come out the way that they designed the words to come out because that's what they think the words should be, versus a person who really wants to communicate the material.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of a really good teacher. Now, when you switched from, just to kind of stay in that education bit again, when you switched from community college to some of the other courses you've taken, what were your experiences? Because you've had experiences in a few different areas now.
Yeah. Um, as far as the switch from community college to the university that I went to, I did it online, so my experience already is different from a lot of people. And so it is harder to compare professors that I had in person at my community college versus online.
Yeah.
It's I know that it's a really hard format for teaching and harder to get to know your students. Um, I I'm fine with an independent work. I've done it a lot, and so I think that really helped me with it. But it was harder just because there wasn't that support of office hours. If there was something I was having trouble understanding or homework I needed help with, I didn't have anyone to go to. Um, and oftentimes there weren't really lectures. It was more just like reading the textbook and figuring it out. And I think that was difficult, but it was still valuable because it really just forced me to really exercise being able to find answers in on my own and just really study the textbook and figure out, okay, what does this mean, and how can I use this information to figure out whatever's on the homework.
Yeah. It really forces you to be resourceful and to do research
Yeah.
where you might find multiple sources instead of just having a single source. And that brings up an interesting thought. If you went to a college where you just had one source, which would be your teacher, and that was like in the community college setting,
Mhm.
did you feel inclined to use your teachers at the community college setting as kind of your only primary source, or did you vet what they said also with other resources? Since you had a human there, what was kind of your
Yeah.
experience in that way?
No, that's a great point. It's not something that I thought about at the time. When I was in community college, I didn't really even think to question my professors. Just they studied, they got the jobs, they must know what they're talking about. But I do remember one professor in particular. It was one of my calculus classes. I don't remember which one, but he said, "Don't take my word for it." And then he would, like, when he would introduce a new topic, he would give us one proof, and then he would give us a different proof to be like, okay, this is also, and then he would give sources. And now that you're saying it, you mentioned it, I now realize the significance of that, because at first I was thinking, well, you don't need to convince me to believe you, because I trust that you know what you're talking about. But it really was valuable for him to be able to say, there's a reason this is true other than just I'm the one telling you. And so I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about this a lot, probably mainly because I'm not young anymore. And I've seen that what we know, so a system of record, what we know at any given moment in time is actually and which means the truths that we know,
Yeah.
truth, they're dynamic, and yet we're not taught that they are dynamic. So well, I do know that whatever I was taught in biology in 1984, a lot of it's not true anymore, but it's not, we've just discovered more things. So that the risk of believing one single source is a really big risk. And,
Hmm.
and the risk of believing an adult just because they have a job is also a big risk. And that's something that I want, all young people, even at your jobs and stuff, to really question, question authority. Because it not to be just annoying, um, or doubtful as a skeptic by nature, but because to question someone is not to devalue their perception, but to give yourself the opportunity to learn more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think,
mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. So what do you think about that? I was just about to ask you.
Oh, I was going to say that's a great point, and actually something that I ran into last week with my job. I had been given a task shortly after I started, which was just a couple months ago. I was given a task, and one of the main software developers on this project was just giving me a high level broad overview, and he gave me an outline of how to approach the problem. And he didn't delve super deeply into the code because he had so many other tasks, but he
Right.
was like, this is just the general broad outline. You can go into the code and figure out exactly the implementation, but this will get you started. And I thought, okay, great. And it made a lot of sense. Um, and I spent about a month and a half on this, and the farther I got, the more one specific part of the approach I was thinking, this doesn't seem possible, and if it is possible, I could maybe do it in a sort of wonky approach, but I don't think this would be very good. I think it would make the code overall more inefficient. So I kept working on it and working on it. And finally, it got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to reach out to him and ask for help. I'm going to show him this is the problem I'm running into. This is why I think it is. And I think that actually it has to do with the approach that I'm using. I think we should, reassess it. So he looked at it. We spent a couple hours actually, and he pulled in someone else from another project who's very knowledgeable about the code and the language we were using. And we had this really long brainstorming session, went longer than we had all planned. And he said, actually, you're right. This is a much more complicated test than I thought when I first gave it to you. And yes, we need to do two other approaches. And he was like, we could maybe try this or this. Will you please look into both these approaches? Come up with how you think you might implement them, and then bring it back to me, and then we'll go over it again and see if either of those approaches are possible. So I think if I was just thinking, he can't be wrong, I can't question what he said, then I would probably still be working on it with the old approach and not be getting anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example. I'm so glad that you can share that. And again, it doesn't make the person who gave you the assignment any less knowledgeable. It just means that when we create something so complex as a program, for, whether it's, I don't know what the software is for this particular, but whether it's doing, designing trajectories or calculating the efficiency of propulsion or the load bearing or whatever it is, if everything that's done in aerospace is so complicated that you need to have not one expert, but multitudes of experts. And if we question things more and bring in people as we need to, then we get the best results. So you did a remarkably brave and effective thing of analyzing it, identifying the kernel that was where the question was, coming up with some solutions, and then taking it back to your manager. So great job, first of all. And I think that sharing will encourage other young people to do the same thing. So that's a great example. I appreciate you sharing that. So you've been there now, how many months?
I think three. I
Three
started in
months.
August, so yeah,
Yeah.
just about 3
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah. And in your journey from school, so there's always this transition phase. You talked a little bit about how you kind of were inspired and learned about this as a an arena for careers. How about you talk a little bit about figuring out what parts of the career world that were possible as you were exploring that, and maybe touch on some of the things that we talked about together when you're sort of in that exploration phase, and share some of the things that you learned during that period of deciding, okay, these are the different things that I might do based on my interest, and how you navigated that.
Sure. Um, well, as far as wanting to do software development, um, I mentioned before that I wanted to do math, so that's what I did my associates in. But I realized that the types of professions you can get with a math degree, or the type of work that you would do um, with a math degree, weren't exactly what I wanted to do. I liked just doing homework problems, but that's not usually what you're doing. So, um, towards the end of my associates in math, I had to take a programming class, and I loved it. And I was like, if I get a degree in this and I start working, it's going to be very similar to what I just learned. You're actually going to be given a problem that you need to solve, and you're going to be writing code. And I thought I would be very happy to do that. So then when I transferred, that's what I pursued. And so far, 3 months into doing it as a real job, I love it still. Um, and then the different opportunities I had kind of towards the end of school, I had done an internship at NASA. It was an OSTEM internship, which means that it's just for a semester or for a summer. Um, and then it's over, and then if you want to do another internship, you have to reapply. Um, there are a whole lot of OSTEM internships. They're very competitive, but there are quite a lot of them at all of the centers. And I did like it a lot. The specific work I was doing wasn't really software development, so I learned a lot, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Um, After that, there was a Pathways internship that I applied to. Um, and those ones are different than OSTEM internships. They're more competitive, there are fewer of them. And the way a Pathways internship works is there are a total number of hours that you do for the internship, and it can get split over several semesters. And then at the end of that, you aren't guaranteed a job, but you do have the opportunity to apply for a job with less competition. Um, so it's not guaranteed, but it is easier to get a job from a Pathways.
Mhm.
And I did get offered a Pathways internship at NASA Langley, and I thought that I would do it all the way in Virginia. I was going to move. It also wasn't exact. It wasn't software development, but it was pretty cool. It was mission planning,
Mhm.
and it was very similar to the NCAS program and the L-Space program. And I know for absolutely certain those two things were the reason why um, I got the offer. It was not just that they saw it on the resume, but in the interview they asked me a lot of questions that I only was able to answer because those other two programs had taught me how to think about mission planning. Um, and they said they were impressed with, the way that I formulated my answers. And I was thinking, that's thanks to L-Space and NCAS. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I was getting ready to do that, and then they NASA was put on a hiring pause. So they said, actually, we cannot hire anyone new, and they actually had to lay people off. And so that was really sad. And I was, of course, disappointed. But looking back or seeing where I am now, I'm actually very grateful it happened, though I wasn't at the time. So I was sad, but I thought, well, I'll just keep applying to other things. And they said, when we're able to start hiring again, please like apply again, and maybe it will work out in the future. Um, so since I wasn't able to do that, I applied to Brooke Owens, the Brooke Owens Fellowship, which is great. It's for gender minorities who are passionate about aerospace. They want to get a career um, in really any field that's related to aerospace. And I think it doesn't even need to be STEM related. I'm not positive about that. You might know since you're very familiar with Brooke Owens.
Yes, I think, I mean, the focus on it is really in creating an infrastructure. It is an infrastructure to help people navigate into the industry and get mentors and job opportunities and a peek into the internship program, essentially. But it's really about connecting and being part of a network. So there are students that go into a lot of different things through the Brooke Owens programs for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I do know it is related specifically to aerospace.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And gender minorities. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had applied to Brooke Owens before and didn't even get past the first round.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, didn't get even to step two. But this time I applied again and I got to step two and then the next step, and I made it all the way to the finalist round. And in the finalist round, you get matched with a few different companies, and then you get to interview with them. I got matched with two companies. One was the Aerospace Corporation. The other one um, ended up, after I got matched with them and a few other of the applicants got matched with them, they decided they weren't going to do any internships that year. And so everyone who had gotten matched with them just, they lost that one. And then they just had whatever else.
Mhm.
So then that left me with just the Aerospace Corporation. So I interviewed with them and I loved the people who interviewed me. Um, something when you're in college, I think this is true of many people. It was definitely true of me. And you are just trying to get to a job. You're so desperate, or I was so desperate that it was just anyone who will say yes to me, I will say yes to them.
No.
Yeah, now I know that that's not a good approach.
We had a few conversations about that. You were
Yes, we did.
valuable.
Yes. Um, you can end up in places you don't like and
Mhm.
wish you were not
Yeah.
that way. But at the time, that was kind of what I was thinking. But then I had this interview with the people at Aerospace Corporation, and they were so, like my community college professors, they were so passionate about what they did, and you could tell that they loved their job,
Yeah.
which is not always true of people who interview you. They just seemed so happy to be doing what they were doing, where they were doing it. And there were two people interviewing with me. And when I saw them interact with each other, they were just so amicable. You know, they liked each other, they liked what they did. And I thought this seems like a great environment to be in. Not only is it doing what I want to do, but they just seem like great people and they seem like they like it. Um, and so I was impressed with that, and so I was like, okay, I was really hopeful, but then I did not get chosen by the Brooke Owens Fellowship. The people on the aerospace side said that it was between two candidates, but it was Brooke Owens who made the final decision, and they went with the other candidate for aerospace. And so I was disappointed, and I thought,
Now I want to say something here. I'm going to do a little Aaliyah plug. A lot of students would get discouraged at that point, right? And be like, oh
yeah,
gosh, I can't compete, right? This is one of those pivot points that sometimes makes people be discouraged, but you stuck it out. You continued.
yeah.
So talk to them a little bit about, so kudos to you again.
Oh, thank you. Um, yes, I was disappointed and I thought, I just have to apply to other places. And this would have been, I think this was my junior year.
Mhm.
It was I was applying for these things in fall of, oh my goodness.
2022, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was 2020.
Um, yes, I should know these
I could
dates.
look at my Google Drive and see.
Okay. Oh, I should also back up. Part of the reason why I'm trying to remember is I was originally going to graduate in spring of 2024,
Mhm.
and I decided to wait a full year later. Um, one, because I was doing something like 18 units a semester and working, and I was definitely burnt out, so I don't recommend that. I felt the pressure to get through it quickly.
You were
And
working so hard. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, I if I think that it's good to slow down
Mhm.
and learn things well and have outside experiences. But part of the reason I did that was because I thought I want an extra semester to um, to spread out my units, and then I want another extra semester to do another internship.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'll go back to the Burgoyne story. So this was it was approaching my junior senior year, and I just found out I did not get selected for the finalist Burgoynes. So I was going to apply to other places, but then I thought, I had such a great experience with the people who interviewed me. Why don't I just email them directly? Since I now have their contact information, and since they've seen my face, we've talked, maybe they will have an internship opportunity for me outside of Brooke Owens. So I emailed them and they emailed me back and they said, "We'd love to have you. We were so sad when Brooke Owens said we could only have one intern." They were like, "But yeah, we would love to have you just outside of that." So I got a normal internship with them. That was summer of 2024. And then I asked, can I continue in fall of 2024 to do it online? So I'd go back to school, go back home, but just do it online. And they said, sure. And before my internship ended, they said, when you graduate, we'd love it if you come back for a full-time position. And that's where I am now. And same department, same people, and I still love them.
Yeah. It's really it's wonderful to hear each of these pivot points, really, that where you had to make a decision and things went not exactly as planned, because that's really what life is, right? But what you exemplified is doing the things, is really sticking with what felt right and what you were passionate about. And I think that's really meaningful for a lot of students to hear. Um, Now, what about your decision-making processes? Because we talked about some of those things when you were kind of going through some of these stages. Um, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the insecurities that you had? Like, I know when you were with the Langley thing not working out, that put sort of a whole slew of questions. And even going to Langley actually presented some challenges, right?
Yeah.
And then deciding to move, outside of the region where you were staying because you had this opportunity to save money and, live in a rent-free situation, right? So what are some of those challenges and how did you work through those? I'm sure your family was a support for sure too. Just in terms of, but what were some of your thought processes and how you worked through those things?
Sure. Um, yeah, with my internship, my OSTEM internship at Langley, um, because I was doing work that wasn't exactly what I was studying, it was really hard for me. There was a big learning curve, and the nature of the project I was given, they told me it was very open-ended, and there was less. They said they didn't really have a clearly defined goal, and they said it was different from any other internship they've given to someone, any other task, because they didn't really have a good idea of what they wanted, and that's kind of what they wanted me for, was to try and like brainstorm things and figure it out. And that was really difficult for me because in school you're just always you're given a specific thing that you need to accomplish, and then you might accomplish that in creative ways, but at least you have a clear idea of the goal. um, and I think that even though it was a great opportunity for me to think differently and to approach problems differently, and I had to learn how to kind of take ownership of a task. It also made me question my abilities because I felt so challenged that I thought, well, maybe I'm just not cut out for aerospace at all, which is not a good reaction because that's a very small, a specific thing that I was doing, a very small part of it. But I definitely did feel that way, and I thought that they would be so disappointed in me and regret that they had hired me as an intern. And I know that you were very encouraging, telling me like everyone thinks that they all have imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you were very encouraging and pointed me to all the things that I had done already. To kind of encourage me that am capable of working hard and working through things and doing well. And at the end, they ended up being very happy with what I had done. So that's also
Yeah.
you often when you're in it, especially I think right out of college when you're already questioning yourself, you don't have a good idea of what you should know. Because at when I was coming in, I was thinking, all these people knew so much because they had been there so much longer than me. I was thinking, is this something that everyone should know? Or is it reasonable that I don't know this because I've just graduated? I was still kind of figuring out, am I normal and these people are just they know these things because they've been here so long, or should I already know all this stuff?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that that's one thing that contributes to imposter syndrome is
Mm.
you just you don't have a good measure yet for what
Mhm.
you should and shouldn't know. And I would argue that if you don't know it, then there's nothing that I would define as you should already know this. If you don't know it, then it's because you've spent time learning other things, and I've been surprised there are some people at work even who are very high level. They've been there for decades, and they'll ask a question in a meeting, and I think, oh, I'm very surprised that they don't know it because I know it and I think it's common knowledge. But
Yeah.
then those same exact people will say things in the meeting that are so, so knowledgeable that I think, wow, how do you know that? So it just, what that highlights for me is that there is just so much knowledge in the world. Nobody can know everything. And you might think that you are not qualified because there are specific things you don't know. But there are probably other people who are high level who don't know that either. And there are probably things you do know that are very helpful. So you can't judge yourself on the things you don't know because that's going to be infinite, because there's probably infinite knowledge out there. So just measure yourself on the things you do know and the things you do well.
Yeah. And you framed it beautifully, and I know those were hard times because imposter syndrome is real. And that was one of the things that you did experience, and a lot of students I work with experience. And I think that your example of being in a meeting where people that you work with that are your superiors, this whole hierarchy business really has no place. It should be teammates, right? But people don't know what each other knows, and there's so many things that are coming to light now. If you think about it, a lot of what you guys are studying in school right now are things that weren't even known for when the people that you're going to be working for were in school. So you guys are going to come to your jobs with a whole body of knowledge that is actually unique and fresh. And that's why your perspectives are so important, and your ways of thinking in each one of your perspectives. So it's great you had that experience, um, and that's a good way of really presenting it. So thank you for sharing that with students, and also just Aerospace Corporation did not. Neither of us are paid by Aerospace Corporation to say this stuff, but I do have to say I have a pretty strong affection for Aerospace Corporation, as you already know.
Yeah.
They're a pretty great organization. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad it's successful for them. Now, one of the things that we talked about a lot also was culture, right? The culture of a company. And we had a lot of conversations about, where you're going to be successful. So can you describe a little bit about the different places where you've been, where you've done things, including just even small teams? Because sometimes even in the same company, one team can have kind of a different culture as another, because honestly, the leaders of groups and companies and divisions, they really set that, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that when you were in that part of your journey, when you're trying to decide, where you're going to decide to work? Because, you had, more than one opportunity to choose from. So
Yeah.
that's important for young people to think, I think, as well, to hear.
Yes, I think, well, as far as culture of the individual people or the teams, the people that make up the teams, that I've been on. I've been really lucky to with all of my internship and jobs had really amazing people who are not only good at what they do but also very kind and welcoming. And so that was great. Even my internship at NASA, the people were really nice and even in a not work related way, like they really cared about who you were as a person. But what I liked about aerospace was when I did get that internship, so I reached back out to them. They said yes. They they had paid attention to what I had said in the interview, and they looked for projects that were related to what I had said I wanted to learn in my interview. So they emailed me and they said, here are like 4 or 5 projects that we think you might be interested. Can you please rate them based off of what you want to do and tell us why, and then we'll pick 2 or 3 for you out of that pool. So I was impressed with that. I was impressed that they had even picked ones that were they started out with ones that were related to what I specifically had wanted to learn. Not only the programming languages, but also the types of things I wanted to learn through that. So that impressed me. They showed they were listening and they cared. And then, based off of my feedback, they came back and they said, actually, we don't think any of these options, based off of what you said and why you rated them this way, we actually think that these 2 projects you would like even more than the 5 we originally had picked out for you. And I was like, okay, great. So I ended up doing that and really liking it, really liking the people on those projects. And the same thing happened when I came back. Through the government shutdown, a lot of projects got shut down,
Mhm.
and they worked really hard to make sure that I had projects that were funded and projects that aligned with what I wanted to learn. And that's very impressive that they were able to not only keep me funded but also keep me on things that I wanted to do. And I think that just speaks to the the type of people who work there, because I at one point I was wondering, man, did I just hit the jackpot with my department of this whole company of thousands of employees? I just picked the best one. But as I've talked to other people in other departments, it's not isolated to mine. It's just I think that aerospace just attracts people
Mhm.
like that, because everyone I talk to has had similar experiences.
It's so I want to add another little plug here for you again, that one of the signs of a great company is that they recognize great resources. And so when they're because they saw in you all that amazing potential, that's you, right? And that's something that you've put in all the work. So what they were seeing is your own history that you have created alone. Not alone, but you've done that, right? And so they recognized a good person and they did those things because they recognized a good person. I would say that not everybody will necessarily get that treatment, but it tells you that you are 2 things, that they are willing to do what's best for their company by bringing in those best people, but also what's best for the individual because they recognize that that fit is so important to being productive both for you and for them as an organization. So just a really great sign of a good company.
Yeah.
But you also have to give yourself some props for that.
Well, thank you.
So, so one of the other things we talked about when we were um, you were in that place where you had some, offers on the table. We talked about salaries and accepting, and you don't have to talk about any specific numbers, but can you talk a little bit about so what our conversations were and what your thoughts were about salaries? Because I know that when students are getting job offers, you know, one of 2 or 3 or 4 things can happen. I don't know. A lot of things can happen. You can get offers that are lowball, um, and maybe they seem lower than what the job is, or you can get job offers that seem high and they make you, like, what is that? Um, they it may not fit the job, whatever. There's so many different things that can happen, but you learned a lot through that process as we were talking about. Well, there's also things like the benefits um, and those kinds of things, that whole picture. And then maybe talk a little bit about what that was like and what you learned through those, through that process when you were making that
Yeah,
choice.
yeah. Um, a- as you already mentioned, I had come to you to ask about after I'd gotten my aerospace offer. They said that they would give me an offer of salary, and then afterwards there would be a meeting, and I could negotiate that if I want. And so I came to you asking, like, how do you negotiate a salary? What are the things you want? What are the things you ask for? What do you say? What's something that is acceptable? What's fair for both parties? I just had no idea what to even do going into that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned things like benefits, that the number of the salary itself is not all that you're getting, because there are a lot of benefits and other things that go along with that. Um, and then also work culture, which is not doesn't have to do with what you're getting compensated, but that is also a really important um, aspect to think about. And I think it's one that people don't put as much importance on, but I
Mhm.
think it's probably one of the most important things.
Yeah.
Um, which it's easy to say that now that I have a job, because in the moment I understand that it's so hard to get jobs right now that you really just you want to get anywhere. And even if you're not planning to stay there a long time, just to get experience. And I do understand that, and that is valid, but the work environment really is so important. It can be the difference between you loving your job and hating your job, even
Yeah.
if it's something. If you even if you're doing something you don't hate, um, the work culture can really
Yeah.
really make it an awful experience. Um, but yeah, I
And
think
you did, and you did have other offers on the table too. So, I mean, at that throughout this period, I remember. So,
yes. Well, when I was graduating, the other offer that I had was staying at my job that I had worked for 7 years from high school to through all the way
that was
through
one of them, right?
college.
Yeah.
And that was completely unrelated to
Yeah.
school. I was doing a lot with gold and silver investment.
Mhm.
So for me, the reason that I picked aerospace was really because it would give me experience that my other job wouldn't.
Right.
And it wasn't really a comparison of the pay as much as, do I want to stay in this place? I already knew I loved it and I could be close to home,
Mhm.
um, doing something I already really enjoyed, or do I want to do something that's related to what I actually studied and what I've been spending so much hard work on these past 7 years? And so I picked that one because, um, yeah, it was what
Yeah.
I wanted to do.
But it's also a testimony because you had something you were familiar with, and you had there were a lot of reasons they were trying to keep you, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And but venturing out into this space that you're focused on learning, in retrospect, sounds like it was the right decision for you.
Yeah, I'm really happy that
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So what are some of the other challenges along the way? I know that, and I'll just bring up some things that other students have brought up, in internships. And it sounds like you really didn't have any of these experiences, but maybe you saw some things or learned or heard from other students even that you could share where, um, for example, I had one student who was in a department where there was a pretty heavy, um, and this is a tough topic, so just, you're welcome to say it's not comfortable, but a heavy bias towards men in the department, and a lot of the behaviors were things that might not be comfortable for someone who wasn't, a man to be around and hearing and that kind of thing, um, without getting into any great detail.
Yeah.
But
But
that was one thing, and other things are things like the concept of moving further away from home. So like we talked about that and what some of the advantages and disadvantages were. And yeah, so what are some other thoughts that you were going through? Because there were a lot. You had a lot of things to consider and a lot of things on the table.
yeah. Um, I've never experienced in personal experience, um a situation where um, there was bias for men or anything like that that would have been racist or because of my gender.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been really great. I've yeah, whether school or work, that hasn't been something I've
Yeah,
experienced, which is very
it's
nice.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then moving from home, I am very close to my family, and so that is something that's harder. Just I am still in the same state.
Mhm.
I'm just in Southern California instead of Northern California, so it's just like a 7 hour drive away. Um, but that is still
Yeah.
a lot farther. It's not something that you can just go for the weekend unless you have a long weekend or you plan it. Um, and at the time, or one sister had just given birth, and then two of them were pregnant, and so it was just I knew that I would be missing out on
Mhm.
um, being able to watch my nieces and nephews grow up from a closer proximity. I still get to see them, and I um, get to FaceTime with them, and I visit home, but it is different from my first nephew, who I was very close to, always babysitting him. So we have a super close bond. And it was just sad knowing that I wouldn't be able to have that same kind of connection with the younger ones. Um, but I mean, I also knew that the opportunities that I wanted were not close to home. So that was
Yeah.
something that I always knew would have to come at some point.
Yeah. And just even you're living in the Southern California area now. It is a really big cultural difference between Southern California and Northern California, right? Even just the transportation systems and all of that kind of thing. What's your experience like now that you're in that region and some of the things that you were worried about that didn't come to be true and other things that you didn't think about that might be challenges now? What are some of those things that you've experienced just moving to the area?
Yeah. I think for me, it was I didn't have any expectations. It was such a
Ah,
blank spot in my mind because I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't really have any disappointments or surprises because I didn't have anything I was expecting.
that's actually really great.
Yeah, and I guess so.
Yeah.
Um, but no, it's been really great.
Mhm.
I mean, I do still miss home, but
Mhm.
I mean, I'm only 3 months in, so I haven't had a whole lot of time for homesickness to sink in. At the moment, it feels like I'm at an internship because I'm exactly where I was for my other internship, and I'm at about the same 3 month mark. So I've been away from home for 3 months at a time before to do an internship, and I think subconsciously I feel like, oh, I'm just gonna go back home when my internship's over, even though I'm staying here long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so s- I'm not I'm not dealing with homesickness right now,
Yeah.
but it probably will sink in at some point. Um, and no, I do like it down here. I think that as far as the trees, I think, are the biggest difference for me. Back
Yeah.
home, it's the trees are bigger and more green, redwoods and oaks and all kinds of huge trees. And there are a lot of beautiful trees here, but there are also a lot of palm trees, which are just so different than than the leaves back home.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think the beaches are different. They're much more flat here and they're great for surfing, but back home they're much more wild and rugged. And that's what I
Yeah.
personally prefer, probably because I grew up with it. But
Yeah.
I think I think that's actually the biggest difference. As far as
Yeah.
the people, um, everyone I have met, I think that I'm very lucky to really meet kind people everywhere I go. So
Well, I think we attract people to us that are similar to us in those ways too. So it's
maybe.
but I can see the coastline. You're absolutely right. It's hugely different.
Yeah.
In some ways, it is sort of like moving, from one. But but the weather is probably pretty similar. It's not like moving from one coast to another in that respect.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So what about, I think that one of the things that a lot of people, a lot of students don't think about are is the importance of all of the activity. I mean, you've done a lot of things. So when I first met you, I had no concerns at all that you were, I wasn't like, oh gosh, this student is not going to excel. I pretty much knew knew you were going to do great things. So for me, that was,
Yeah.
easy. Um, but but I think some of those things that impressed me about you was that you are willing to try things that might be outside your comfort zone. And you just had a great point without expectation. So I think that's a lesson that's great for young people to understand is that being willing to try things that are outside of your comfort zone, again, without expectation, you're not going to be disappointed or surprised or whatever. Maybe you'll be surprised, but that's a really, really strong trait that you have, which I think has probably led to your success. What do you think about that?
Um, I I guess so. I think that my mom really instilled in me that if you want to learn something, then you just do it. I think that because we grew up um, not really having the resources to um, take lessons for certain things, the way that other people, or not all other people, but if you have more resources, then if your kid wants to take piano lessons, then you just hire someone to teach them. We didn't have that. I really wanted to learn piano.
Mhm.
Someone had gifted our family an old piano. It was out of tune, hadn't been tuned since it was created, and it was an old piano, but it was a piano,
Mhm.
and I wanted to learn it. And my mom had a book on how to read music, sheet music. And they couldn't afford piano lessons, but mom was like, "Well, you can play the piano that we have." So I learned how to read the sheet music, learned really simple songs with just the right hand and then the left hand, and then started playing more complicated songs. So it was just and that was when I was 9. And there were other things growing up. My brother, when I was 12, my brother wanted to do fencing, and we couldn't afford that.
I was going to bring that
Oh,
up, so I'm glad you are.
yeah. And so my mom was like, "Well, I can take pictures." She had a camera. She had done some photography jobs before, and she had done a few like graphic design odd jobs before. And so she went up to the coach and she was like, "Hey, I can't pay for lessons, but you don't really have a website, so can I take pictures for you, videos, do graphic design, whatever you need for the first year? And then in that year, you can teach my kids how to become coaches, and then they can work for you and pay for their lessons." And he was like, "That sounds great." He was super nice too. So she did that for the first year, and then when the coach felt like we were ready to actually be helpful, then we started out helping assist him with running classes for the younger kids, and then it turned into a quite a few years of
Yeah.
doing all kinds of events for him and lots of after school programs and summer camps. And so I mean, those are just two examples of
Yeah.
things that my mom did that it was it was a lifestyle growing up, and I
Mhm.
thought that was normal. And so I think that was a big reason that when I was graduating high school with no money and my parents had no money, it didn't translate to me as I can't do college. It was just like, "Oh, I'll just do what my mom has always done. I'll just you go until you're able to do it."
Yeah. And I think that that's a lesson that, first of all, kudos to your mom, because I will say there's a lot of parents that don't have either the wherewithal or the ability or sometimes the health or a lot of different barriers to that thing. So kudos to your mom for doing that and being that person for you. But also I want to encourage students who are hearing this, so that you're hearing Eliya talk about how she had this experience of not necessarily having the resources So maybe you don't have a parent that can do that for you, but you can do that for yourself, right? So you could go to a coach if you wanted to do something, or a piano teacher, and say, hey, let's do a trade. So those are those kinds of things that it's a great lesson to learn. And you have continued to do that for further your own career. Um, and you've learned a lot of very valuable and interesting things. I've learned from talking to you about your work at the job that you had before. It's very interesting stuff. Um, so again, kudos to you and your mom. And I think that's a great example of something that students can do for themselves, even if they don't have a person doing that for them. It's a great thing, a tool to use. Um, Now you have also done tutoring and been in leadership, been open to leadership opportunities. And I know how important that is. Um, but I also know that it can be challenging if you're a shy person, perhaps, or not outspoken, or not the biggest, room person in the room, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You've gone ahead and done a lot of things. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those, like, the leadership, the National Society of Leadership and Success that you've done, the entrepreneur club that you were in, computer science club, all those things. Maybe talk about some of those and how you were able to grow as a person. Uh,
Okay.
because I
Yeah.
think that that's something that students would really benefit from.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, as far as how I've grown as a person, um, as when I was younger, I was the most shy person I have ever met. I have never met anyone was, who is as shy as I was. And that was really up to just like maybe 5 years ago, even maybe 1920 is when I really forced myself to start talking to people. Um, but I'm talking about shy to the point where I would physically hide behind people. And I think that being part of a big family, it's easy to do that. You
Yeah.
know, you go up to people, and if there were people, I would actually hide behind my other family members so I didn't have to talk to people. I would um, avoid any kind of social events. Even if people um, would seek me out to talk to me to try and make me feel included, they would talk to me, and I wanted so much to talk to them, but I would get so I didn't know what to say. I thought, how do people know how to just communicate with other people? How do they come up with things that are interesting to say? And I would just shut down, like I would not respond even though I really wanted to.
Yeah.
Um, so that was something that I struggled with since I was little.
Mhm.
And when I started coaching, that helped a lot because I had something specific to say. The biggest difficulty for me was I didn't know what to say to people. I thought, how do you respond to someone in a way that is interesting? You know, how do I continue the conversation? They would say something and I would just think, okay, I don't know how to add on to that. But with coaching, it was I knew the material that I had learned, and then I was teaching someone else, and I was surprised with myself that I didn't really have any trouble talking to people that way
Mhm.
because I knew exactly what to say. It was almost like a script. And even if they asked me questions, it was something that I knew how to respond to. Even if it wasn't something that was scripted, I knew the information and they were asking me questions. And I think that was a really helpful training ground just to get me used to talking to people where I knew what to say. And then from that, I was able to build on to things that were a lot more creative. It requires more dynamic thinking and being able to improvise with things to say. And then I learned just to relax more and just be interested in the other person. And then, it kind of becomes more natural coming up with things to say. Um, and so that was actually a big thing. And my fencing coach, because I was the only girl coach, when he would go to events, like for after school programs when he was advertising. We have after school programs or summer camps. He would always bring me as a representative because he wanted people to know girls can fence too. He would often bring my brother along with me, but he would often pick us two specifically because I was a girl. I am a girl. And so that was really difficult for me because I was so shy. But I am grateful now that he forced me to go out and talk to people. Um, and I think that really went. Then by the time that I was graduating high school and starting my first job, that was customer service, and that was also um, that was easier for me because again it was helping people invest in gold and silver. I was learning about it, and so I had something that I was knowledgeable about to talk to them about. um, and then that was a more professional setting than what I had done as a coach. And I was also coaching at the same time, but I think that I kept building and stepping up on those things in environments that were easier for me because I had something specific to talk about. And then when I got to college and joined the clubs that you mentioned, like computer science club, the engineering club, the women in STEM and entrepreneurship, um, those were all clubs associated with my community college, which another plug for community colleges is they also have opportunities in clubs like that. Um, and if they don't, then it's pretty easy to start one.
Mhm.
And that's also a great thing to have experience with is starting a new club. Um, yeah, I think that what I learned as a coach and then in my first job just carried into everything I did after that.
Mhm. I I will just say too, I personally have witnessed a change in how you're communicating. So I
I
I can
believe it.
I can definitely see a change and it's really pretty wonderful. But I will say also, I didn't have a doubt that you would get there. Just
Well, thank you.
um, so you've done a lot of things like not everybody has the breadth and the diversity of skills you have. So I'm just going to talk about you a little bit. Hopefully I don't embarrass you too much, but you've studied multiple languages. You are strong in writing as well as the math. So you have really kind of both sectors, things aren't divided up in our brains the way that we thought they were in the 80s, but you have skills in a lot of different arenas. Which makes you a really unique candidate, I think, in a lot of ways, and a huge asset to whatever team you're going to be on. But the wherewithal that you have, your perseverance is really one of the things that I think has continued to your perseverance and your humility, I think, have really continued. I see that as helping you moving forward. And rather than saying, oh, you know, if with it, instead of some people might get angry. I've seen people get annoyed when they weren't selected by Brooke Owens and have this reaction where, oh, well, they should have picked me because whoever's, and I've never seen that in you. And that's really a huge plus, right? So just for students that are listening out there, humility and perseverance are traits that you don't learn in high school or on the job, but they're really, really important to success. Can you think of some areas, some examples of where that might be the case when you reflect back on those two things?
Um, are you asking areas where they were helpful?
Yeah, areas where you think that those two traits. Now, I'm assuming that I'm not. I shouldn't assume that you know that you have those things, but it's been my observation that you do. Does that feel true for you? And is there some examples where you can say yes, either one of those or both of those helped you to move through something that maybe was difficult or to succeed?
Well, thank you. Um, I an answer to one of the questions is if I think I have them. Perseverance, yes, I think that I recognized that. Humility, I think that yes, although sometimes it might have felt more like self-questioning versus humility, but I think there are aspects of that too that I've learned. I think the more that I have um, experienced and the more that I learn, the more I see the difference between the two, and I see that I have both of them. Um, but I think I do have to be careful sometimes because sometimes humility can turn into self questioning. But humility is amazing. I think that it's a wonderful trait. As far as where it has helped, I mean, perseverance in everything I've done, I think has required that. I mean, even when I was in high school, through my early years of community college were really stressful for me just because of all of the things I was doing. Um, I might have been unwise in the amount of things I was doing. Um,
Hmm.
Possibly just, there is a level of stress that is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Um, but I am so grateful for the amount of perseverance I had to have for it.
Mhm.
Um, and it really taught me to work hard and to be able to tell myself what to look forward to afterwards. And I think that that's a big part of perseverance. I think perseverance without hope isn't really possible. I think that
Mhm.
um, you persevere for a reason, for something, and if you don't have hope at the end, then it's really difficult, if not impossible, to persevere. Um, and I think that just as a college student, you have to persevere through um, long nights of homework, having to study for exams, having to say no to certain things that would be really nice. Even things like sleep doesn't have to be a big social event you're saying no to. You have to persevere through those things, and then even people who are nearing the end of their studies, looking for jobs, so many no's that you have to persevere through. And I just want to say that I, you mentioned that I got an OSTEM internship. I applied to, how many was it? I think it was several hundred. I think that it might have been about 500 that I applied for. And this is just so students know the ratio. I think that I got 10 emails back about interviews um, out of that 500. So it's a very small percentage. And then out of those 10 that I got interviews, I think only three of them actually offered me internships. So, um,
That's, I'm so glad you brought up that
yeah,
math, first of
yeah,
all, because I love that everything is math, because I'm a geek. But also, I think that that is something that I didn't actually state about you, but is your discipline, right? And that kind of working to apply to that many takes a lot of discipline. So maybe, and I will say that when I work with students, I know a lot of them don't have that level of discipline. And I will say that your successes are in part also attributed to that trait that you have. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like how you manage to, you know, I mean, maybe it's your math brain that was like, well, I know I need to apply. I don't know. But we did talk about tracking things and using spreadsheets and stuff like that. What was your technique that worked for you so that you could really get that volume out there? Because I think for a lot of students, they feel like there's something wrong with them if they don't get it with they like, or they think that like applying to 20 is actually a lot when it's not, right?
yeah.
Can you talk
Um,
about that a little bit? Dig into that a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the 500 was specifically NASA OSTEM. I was also applying to several other companies and doing like 20 to 50 applications for each of those also. So, um, I did not get, I shouldn't say that. I got many no's. I was going to say I didn't get many yeses, but I did get a few yeses.
Mhm.
I got a lot of no's though, and that's okay because there's so
Mhm.
many people applying to all those things. As far as how I did it, NASA I think that they may have changed their software or their website a little bit,
Mhm.
but I think it is still relatively easy. When I was doing it, you're able to save or use your last application for another one. And so what I did was I kind of the first few took me quite a while. It took me a few minutes on each application, but if you multiply a few minutes by 500, that's a lot of time still. So I
Yeah.
started paying attention to where the buttons were going to be, and like counting where they were. And so then what I did was um, this is a lot of detail, but
Awesome.
I filtered for the ones I would most wanted as far as I would pick ones that had to do with either computer science or math. Um, and then I personally didn't care which NASA center I ended up at, whether it was NASA Langley or Maryland, Goddard, any of them. I was okay with any of them. So that wasn't a problem for me. It was just the type of work I'd be doing. So I was looking for computer science and math. And I opened up, I kept it to about 30 tabs open at once. So I would just do control click on all of the links because on their website they have a whole list of internships. So I would control click all of them and get about 30 on there. And then you can on your computer, if you hold control tab, it will automatically go to the next tab. So with one hand I had my mouse to click on the button and it's in one specific spot, so I would click that button on all 30 tabs, and with my other hand I was doing control tab to all of them, and once I had finished that I would go backwards and then do the next button you had to press. So after doing that, I think that I averaged maybe 5 seconds per application. It was like 5 to 7. I actually did time myself. So it's funny that you asked me.
Love it. I
But
love it.
I was,
Okay, I just want to pause for 1 second. Anybody that's an employer that's listening to this, now you know why Aaliyah is really great at programming and process and problem solving. Okay, go on. This is
but
awesome.
yeah, I wasn't, oops, I wasn't expecting to go into this detail of how I
No, but it's great. These are
applied.
great tips for students.
Yeah, it was just, I think that a lot of times you try and make each application specific and stand out, and that is you do want to do that, but at some point it's they just filter through things so quickly that
Mm.
for those internships I was thinking I'm just going to get a huge volume out there. There's not a whole lot I can change between each application, and so I just did as many as I could, just taking a few seconds per application by pressing all of the buttons really quickly and then doing that. So that's how I was able to
Yeah.
submit like hundreds of NASA applications. And then I also did other aerospace companies. And those ones, usually you can um, also just to reuse your old application.
Mhm.
And so I would really do it by company. I would spend a day applying to all the applications at this company and just keep reusing my old application and then go on to the next company and just do a whole bunch of applications to them.
And that's a great example. And I think when we were working together, we talked a little bit about how you can have this bucket list of all the things you might share. And then each company is going to have, and each job will have things that might be applicable. So when you categorize things, which you're clearly really good at, you
Yeah.
can kind of decide, okay, what are the things that do need to be different between them, and then focus on just those differences. And as you say, kind of standardize. You were actually being an algorithm. You were living an algorithm.
I guess so. But that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
The way that I met you for listeners is through the AIAA. There was a resume writing
Right.
workshop,
Yeah.
and in that, afterwards, I asked you to look at my resume and then help
Right.
me and give me feedback. And I was just expecting you to email me back and give me a few tips, but then you ended up just deciding to mentor me, full on mentorship, which was amazing. But one thing that you told me was look at the company and look at keywords that they use because those keywords are important to them. Those are their values. Look at the specific job description and also look at keywords. What's valuable for them. And so what I would do before doing the 500 applications is I would maybe take a sample, a few of them, and see, okay, what's common between all of these. I'm going to include that in my resume. There was one small section, it was like a short answer,
Yeah.
short essay question, but it was the same exact essay question for all of them. So I copied that, and so I would just do Control V, Control V, Control V for
Yeah.
all of them. Um, and so it wasn't specific to the application, but like you mentioned, it was specific to the company. So then
Right.
if the next day I was applying to Raytheon, then I would do the same thing. I would try and make it specific to them, but not
Mhm.
specific to each application. I mean, I would kind of do it more like, okay, these are all the computer science related ones. And then if there was one that was more math related, then I might have to make a few small adjustments, but then
Yeah.
still do the same thing for all of those.
Yeah.
So really, like you said, just categorizing it because
Yeah.
really, I think at some point volume becomes more effective
Absolutely.
than trying to make yourself fit exactly what they're looking for because they're not looking that closely until you get to the interview um, portion of it.
Yeah. Volume is absolutely important, and it's also an investment, right? So even though you are a living algorithm, no, just kidding. Even though you're able to do that, you were still parsing the information and creating relevance, and but you created a system, and that is really important because everybody's system might be a little bit different, but the volume is also very important. I think a lot of students literally stop and they think, oh, 20 or 50 resumes is enough. And it's just not in this day and age. And then the other piece of it is the networking piece, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to interrupt you. You want to finish what you were saying about your processes for that? Is there anything else you wanted to
No,
add? Okay.
no, that was finished.
Okay. What about networking? So that's something we also talked a lot about, making sure that you keep contacts with the people that you're meeting everywhere you go. Um, and you've talked about some examples where you did that, right? You met the aerospace folks through your original application, and then you continued to have a relationship with them. So how do you feel like relationships and networking and staying in contact with the people you met helped you in your search, or did it not help you? Like, am I making an assumption?
Yeah. I think that yes and no.
Mhm.
Um, the act of networking, I think, was helpful for me. Especially someone who was so shy.
Yeah.
The act of just going out there. Not only was I practicing just the simple thing of talking to people, but I was also practicing getting over my fear of just going out there. And I think that can be applicable to other things to
Yep.
just go out and do it. Um, I mean, my mom had already taught me how to do that, but that was sort of more me personally. I just had to go out and read a book and then play the piano by myself, but I didn't have to interact with other people. So,
Mhm.
this networking is you have to go out and do it and you have to communicate with people. So, that was personally helpful for me. As far as the value I got from the other people, I think it was the the biggest example of a success would be my mentorship with you, um, where I just wanted someone to look over my resume,
Mhm.
and so I reached out to you after the workshop and asked you for feedback, and then you you surprised me by saying, "Yeah, let's meet via Zoom." And I thought, "Oh wow, that's cool. She's gonna take more time than just like reading it and then giving me a few pointers and sending my resume back." And then it turned into this whole history of mentorship. So I think that's an example of where networking became a more long term relationship. Um, Most of the times that I did networking, it wasn't like that. It was more, I'd maybe go to a conference and meet people, and then you never talk to them again. They don't know
Mhm.
who you are. Um, in my personal experience, that wasn't an effective way for me to get an interview. or to get a reference. I don't know if there are other people who have succeeded in that, but for me
Mhm.
personally, it never turned into that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was still helpful to get to know people. And one thing that I started doing, I only did this with a few people, but I would just go on LinkedIn and I would see people who either had positions that I wanted, not necessarily the title, but the type of work they were doing or the place where they were. Or I looked at people who had similar starting points as me, and were now doing something successful, whether it was something I wanted to do or not. And then I would just cold call message them and say, "Can I do an informational interview?" And that for me was not looking for a reference or a referral. It wasn't looking for a job. What I wanted was just to hear about their story. And a lot of people didn't respond because I was just some stranger on LinkedIn. A couple people did say yes, though, and then I was able to just ask them questions like, where did you start? How did you get to where you were? What was your story like? And what I learned from that is no one has the same story. And I think that at the time I kind of had an idea of, oh, I'm going to be at a disadvantage because I didn't pick one of the really well known schools. I picked one that I could do online. It isn't well known. And so I'm going to be, people aren't going to know where my college, and so they won't want me. But I met a lot of people who are really successful who did go to colleges and they said, yeah, no one knows this college. And so that was really encouraging for me. And then there were people who did go to places like MIT or wherever, all these Berkeley, all these big places, and there were people who did college in 4 years. There were people who took 10 years. There were people who dropped out of high school, went back, decided they wanted to get a college education. They started at community college, then got a 4 year degree, and now they're these senior project leaders doing engineering. And so those were not practical referrals, but they were still helpful because then I felt more confident in my own journey because I realized, it doesn't matter how long it takes me. That was part of the reason why I felt more okay deciding I'm going to take another year, even though I've already been in college 6 years. I'm going to extend it because I feel I need an extra semester for an internship. I thought having because it's harder to get internships if you're out of college. If you're a student, if you're undergrad especially, it's way easier to get internships. And I thought it's going to be more valuable
Yeah.
to graduate later and have an extra internship than to say, I graduated in 2024 instead of 2025. They, um, I've never had any company application ask how old I am. So they're not going to know that I was a year older than I originally planned to graduate. But they
Right.
will see that I have an extra internship that I wouldn't have had before.
Yeah. Great examples. Great examples. And yeah, y- working with using LinkedIn as a tool to meet people is a great thing to do. And that's yeah, and then keeping your own I don't know if you do this, but I'll encourage you to now that you're sort of, even though you're newly into the work field per se, is keeping your own uh, network open to other students, right? Because my
Mhm.
network is open to all students. If you want to meet somebody, tell me who in my network you can meet, and we'll make an introduction, right? And being able to do that yourself or being able to do that for someone else is really powerful. And you've definitely made that work for you as well. So that's great that you're using all the tools that are there. It's pretty awesome. And I would venture to say that some of the students who are watching this who have thought, you know, oh gosh, I don't want to email anybody or that I don't know or contact them on LinkedIn have now been inspired by you. So I'm going to make that assumption.
Yeah.
So in this whole journey, you're 3 months in, you're enjoying your work. When let's just say 10 years ago, even before you knew that aerospace was a thing that you were going to be doing, right?
Mhm.
Um, where do you think you might have reflectively thought that you would be in 10 years, 10 years ago?
Um, well, I I knew that I loved languages. Um, I wanted to be an interpreter. I don't actually know why I never pursued it. I think that when I was younger, I kind of had an idea of if it's something that I just love and it's fun,
Mhm.
then it's not productive. I don't know why I thought that. That was not a healthy thought, but
Yeah,
I I I kind of had that idea. But
funny.
math, even though I loved math, I knew that it was productive, so I was able to overcome that. So I think
Mhm.
that's why I pursued math, and I didn't really think of languages as a job, even though there are interpreters. That's definitely
Yeah,
a job.
absolutely.
Um,
Well, and we have to, the obvious thing too is that math and languages are all languages.
yes,
So,
yeah, yeah, and that was part of the reason I think that I loved programming because
Mhm.
it's very so much math goes into it, but then it's also
Mhm.
different languages, and it kind of
Absolutely.
combined into my two loves.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I think I don't know. I think that at that age it feels so far off. To me, it felt so far off. I didn't really think I would ever make it to 10 years later. I thought, I'll
That's fair.
never.
You are still young then. You're pretty young then.
Yeah, I didn't imagine a future where I had actually made it to college, made it past high school. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
But I think that as I grew up, I was like, well, it looks like I'll get through high school, and then it looks like I'll get to college, and then, it kind of went on from there. But I did enjoy languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and this is going to probably annoy a lot of people out there, which is sometimes fun. What's your favorite language to program in?
Well, when I first started C++, plus plus, I mean that's always been my favorite
Okay.
language just because that's what all my classes were in, all of my projects that I did.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I really, I still love C++. plus plus. Now that I'm working, a lot of my projects are in Python, and
Mhm.
I didn't know any Python when I first started. I was put on a project that was in Python, and that's how I learned it. And it's so much easier. And I think, it depends on my mood because sometimes I go into my Python projects and I'm like, wow, this is so much easier. Whereas with my C++ plus plus project, it's a more complicated code base and it takes longer for me to understand what's already written. Because
Mm-hmm.
what I've found and what's different from homework assignments where you're just working on it and you're building it from the ground up, now that I'm working, I'm on projects that are already built and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just adding on to it or I'm changing something. And so I would say that my work is, I do have to write code, but a bigger portion of my work is reading and understanding code that someone else already wrote. So if I were just writing C++, plus plus, I think that it's a little bit easier. But if you're going back and reading already written code, it's much easier to do that in Python than it is in C++. plus plus.
I
And
like that comparison. Hmm.
yeah, and another thing is even with C++, plus plus, I can with my project that's in that language, I can understand what's going on,
Hmm.
but it's also easier to implement something that works, but kind of it doesn't break the code, but it kind of breaks the design philosophy. They might have architected it in a specific way and created certain classes that are made for a specific purpose. And even though
Hmm.
you can take that and use it in a way that works somewhere else, they this specific project is very particular in giving each thing a purpose, and I realized that it's really easy to make things that work and seem like it's not an error. But then when you submit a pull request and someone who's been on the project a long time, they look at it and they say, actually, you didn't know this, but
Mhm.
um, you like to use this for something else, or when we want to implement something like this is the approach we use, and it's very consistent. And I think that was really cool for me to see. So
That's a great way of, first of all, parsing, to use a term, parsing purpose with language and describing how different languages and approaches can do different things. And also the uniformity that we know is important when you're in something like aerospace, because you may work on a piece and solve this problem for a while and then hand it off to someone else and solve this problem and then hand it off, so that that continuity of approach and language is actually really important when
yeah.
you hand those things off. That's a really, really great example. By the way, I love the granular stuff because I'm a geek. So, and I think a lot of other people will appreciate this as well. That's a great example. So Python and C++. Plus plus.
Yeah, those are the ones that I'm most
Mhm.
familiar with
Yeah.
from school and work.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
And, and what about, and this comes up a lot, if you don't have a language of, and we talked about this too, just because you don't have a language that may be listed on a job description, is that something that you feel should stop you from applying?
No, and actually, I was surprised by people who are in charge of hiring who have said that they aren't looking for you to have every skill that's listed. They want you to have as many as possible. But what I thought, oh, if I don't have that skill, then they're going to say no. I thought this is the minimum that they'll even look at. But what it is that they're trying to target the people who apply, and they want you to have as many of those as possible. But it doesn't. If you're missing some, it doesn't automatically disqualify you.
Right. So the
And
lesson
that
is,
comes,
don't disqualify yourself.
yeah, and that comes from the mouth of people who are in charge of hiring. Not me, but other people that I've
Yeah.
talked to.
No, and that's I'm glad that you said that, because some of us, when we do our mentoring, not people don't always believe us when we say that. So I'm glad you added that from the mouth of the hiring people. That's great. Good knowledge to share. Um, what else about your journey do you think is important for other students to, and also for managers who do internships? Because maybe some of those will be watching the video. What are some things that you could tell? We'll start with students. What are some other things that students might learn or that you'd like to share with them about your journey that might be useful?
Um, I think honesty is really huge. Honesty with yourself and with the people who are there. Um, it's really, really easy to want to. Okay, it's really easy to have an idea in your mind of who you're supposed to be, and
Mhm.
you're kind of creating that. You're saying, this is the knowledge I should have. And then you get stuck trying to make yourself look like that person, and you're not being honest with yourself of what your skill set is, and then not honest with those people, and they might have expectations. You might lead them to believe that you are able to do something, and then it takes you longer to do something because you say, oh yes, I know how to implement something like this, and then you don't know how to do it, so then you have to figure it out. You have to do some research and then do it, and then you're taking a long time, and they might think, oh well, you learned this, but for some reason it takes you a really long time to do it. Whereas if you're honest about it and you say, I don't know how to do that, but I'm confident that I can figure out how to do it, then when it takes you a while to do it, they'll be more likely to be impressed and say, oh wow, you didn't have that skill, but you learned it and you gave me something that's high quality. And it will change their perception of what you're giving them. If
Mhm.
you give them an accurate idea of, no, I don't know it, but I'll figure out how to do it. And that's assuming you already have the internship and you're given a task. Because for me personally, I feel that pressure to pretend that I know things that I don't. But
Yeah.
it always works out better when I say I don't know how to do this, and I'm just upfront about it, and I
Mhm.
say, but I'll figure it out, and then they're okay with that because they know that, especially me as a new hire, they don't have assumptions of what I know. I'm surprised sometimes that they'll be like, "Oh, do you know this?" And I think, "Oh yeah, that's super fundamental." But I'm grateful that they will ask me if I know even fundamental things because it shows me, okay, it's okay if there are things that I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's better for them. Then they can plan the amount of time it's going to take you. They can plan how to delegate tasks. And it's helpful for you because you don't feel as pressured to be someone you're not. Um, and and the other thing that I learned is the word yet. It's you don't know it yet, and that's okay. There's a huge pressure to feel like, oh, I need to be that person right now, and it's like, no, it's okay for it to take a while for you to learn that. Just because you don't know something right now doesn't mean you never will. You just don't know it yet. So
It's a journey.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a journey. Those are really great. That's a really great point. Honesty is so, I do see a lot of people wanting to inflate their abilities. And I agree with you 100% that that's never the wise way to go, even on resumes, on anything. So, really great point. Okay, now about managers, internship managers. What are some of the great things that you experienced? Because it sounds like you had great intern managers that you would love to share so that other managers of internships know that that really makes a difference. Because it sounds like you didn't have any bad ones. So, how about sharing some things that really worked for you as a new intern?
yeah. I think one of the biggest ones, which I've already mentioned, was especially at Aerospace, their intentionality to pick something that I wanted to learn. I think that you'll get a lot more productivity out of someone who's working on something they actually care about rather than something they find boring or uninteresting or something totally unrelated to what they've been studying. I mean, there are some people who are looking for something outside of what they're studying because they want a new experience.
Mhm.
But if that's what they want, then they're more likely to take ownership of it and do well at it. So I think that um, someone who has an intern, you spend some time getting to know your intern before assigning a task. That's going to work better for everyone, I think.
Great.
Um, so that was huge. Um, I think encouraging your intern to um, document what they've been doing. I mean, this is for interns also. So I'm gonna plug in my computer, which is about to die.
Oh,
Um, yeah, documentation is huge. As an intern, my when I was applying, I asked my interviewers, what is something that you look for in an intern? And they said, good documentation. That was the first thing they said, which I was surprised about. They said, we like to see what our interns learned.
nice.
They're like, we don't just care about what they actually did for us, but we want to see
Mhm.
how did you learn, how did you grow, and the documentation will also help us pass that um, pass the work you did off to someone who's going to stick around. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes, an intern, you only have a couple months, maybe 3 months. That's a long internship, usually. Um, and that's not realistically a lot of time to get stuff done
Mhm.
um, compared to employees who are there for a much longer time. So, most often, an intern's work will be passed off to someone else. They'll still be doing something very productive and very helpful, but it probably won't be completed. It'll be passed off to someone. And so, documenting that will help that be more smooth and make what you did even more productive. And so my interviewers explained that to me up front, and because of that, I was able to document everything. And then at the end, I had to do a presentation for both of my internships. They required exit presentations where you talk about what you did. And because my manager had asked me to do documentation, which was not required, but they asked me to do that,
Mhm.
it helped me so much to be able to, with that presentation, I was like, I know exactly what I did and with specifics. And I can also, at the end of my presentation, say, look at all the things that I learned. And I
Yeah.
think that people who are employees, they love that just as much as the work that you did, because
Mhm.
internships are an investment to them.
Mhm.
So the work that you're doing might be something someone else could have done, but what you learned is something unique to the intern, and I think that's really valuable to them. So documentation, telling, so managers tell your interns to document what they do, because it'll be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And yeah, that's a wonderful answer. So super. Okay, what about mentors? What would you like to tell people who are considering being mentors? What has worked for you? And because you've done a lot of things, I'm just going to say this, you've done a lot of things on your own. I didn't need to help you with, right? You're a very capable person. Um, but what are some of the things that you think did help you in having a mentor, um, and how other people can do that and support students?
Yeah, I think what was really helpful was when I would ask you specific questions, and then you would answer what I was looking for. I think sometimes, you can go to counselors, like college um, counselors, at the beginning of each semester. Sometimes you have to go and they help you plan out your semester. And I had already done a lot of research to figure out what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And there was one time I went to a college counselor with a very specific question that I wasn't able to find out through research, but I knew they would have access to the answer. And that was the only reason I really went to them. And they started out, they didn't let me speak first, which was fine, but they also didn't ask me questions. They just went into this very long spiel of, I assume it's what they tell all of their students who come to them, and they were helping me plan out from the very beginning. And in my mind, I was thinking, if you would let me speak, or if you would ask me what I'm here for, you would know that I have already planned everything out for this semester, and I have one question to ask you. And I was surprised that someone who was an advisor and counselor didn't take the time to figure out why I was there.
Mhm.
And so I would say that if you're going to be a mentor, then figure out why is this person here and what do they want from me. I think that as a mentor with so much knowledge, it can be tempting to think, oh, there are all these things I want you to know. But I think it's valuable to figure out what they want to know, and there
Mhm.
might be things that they don't know to ask, so that
Mhm.
is valid for you to give them something, but at least figure out what is it that they're looking for. And then once you know that, you can say, hey, you didn't ask me this, but this is what you're looking for, and this is something I know that's going to help you with that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when I came to you, I was wanting help with my resume, and so you answered specific questions that I had, but then you also gave me suggestions that I hadn't even thought of, but it
Mhm.
was still about a resume, and these are good tips. You told me also have a master resume, not just like your resume specific to whatever you're doing, but just keep a list of everything that you're doing, and you can pull from that just kind of just everything you've done on this. It's not everything on there is going to be applicable to everything, but you'll at least have a record of it. And then when you apply to something, you can create specific resumes for wherever you're applying to and pull from that. And so that's an example of how you were helping me with something specific that I was asking for,
Mhm.
um, but still giving me new things, but still in that direction of what I was
Mhm.
actually there for.
Yeah. Well, it was clear to me that you had the perseverance, and you're a process person, so you're good at organizing things. So, yeah. What about other things that maybe we didn't touch on that you think might be helpful for students? Because like I said, with you, you had a lot of things that you were already capable of doing. Um, I know that at times, some of the things we did talk about were about confidence building. And that's not always something that mentors do talk about, but you have done you tend to persevere through those moments of self-doubt. But are there other things like that or different things that maybe we didn't touch on that might be useful for mentors to know? Things that you would like people to do, even if you already knew how to do them.
Um, I'm trying to think of examples. I think maybe, um,
Because you're really good at process, and that's one thing that I think a lot of students are not good at. Um,
yeah, I guess um, one thing that can be overwhelming is figuring out where to start with just applying to things and even knowing what resources are available. I'd
mhm,
say before um, I joined that first engineering club at my community college, I didn't realize the importance of internships or research programs. Um, and that is so much more important than a GPA, which I didn't realize. I was just
mhm,
trying to make money and get good grades, pay for college.
yeah,
Um, and that's what my focus was on. I was like, I need to work to pay for college, and then I need to keep up my good grades. And I didn't leave as much time for internships. But then when I joined the engineering club, the president of the engineering club, who was a fellow student, was talking about the importance of having experiences on your resume. And she was that was what convinced me to join the club. Um, when she recruited me, and she would talk about that, and she's also the one who started the Women in STEM and Entrepreneurship Club, which was also you mentioned. And so that's kind of when I realized how important it was, and that's what got me into those NASA programs. Um, and so I think that a really valuable thing a mentor can do is let students know, because I think this is common, let students know that outside experiences are as and probably more important than grades.
mhm,
And then also, what's the process of even applying to those and what is available to you?
right.
Because it is hard to get into them sometimes, because they are very competitive and there are so many out there. But what you can do is narrow it down to what's the field that I'm going into. Oftentimes, there are also ones that are specific to gender minorities, like Brooke Owens, or um, eth- ethnicity minorities, like the Z Factor Fellowship.
Mhm.
I think that's what it's called. And then Brooke Owens' sister fellowship is Patty Grace, which
Yes.
is, I believe, that's specific to.
Mhm.
Um,
Cultural different, minorities. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Mhm,
So oftentimes you can apply to ones that are a little bit more narrow.
mhm,
And so those ones they're still very competitive.
mhm. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but it can narrow down who all is applying to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so there are those, and then same thing with scholarships. There are some that are specific to um, all the same things that I mentioned: gender, ethnicity, um, the specific field that you're going into. And so I think that that's a big thing that mentors can help with, since it can be overwhelming how many options are out there.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of scholarship. Yeah, we didn't really touch on that, but there are a lot of scholarship opportunities out there. For just one brief moment, because you had done all this yourself, so it's not something that I really needed to teach you how to do because you were already doing these things. But what percentage of your scholarships were really helpful for you getting you through these different phases? And do you have a favorite resource that you'd like to share with students?
Um, for scholarships, I
Mhm.
don't think I can be very helpful. All of the scholarships I got were in my community college
Oh,
years,
okay.
and
They were,
they were,
uh-huh,
yeah, and they were through my community college.
uh-huh.
Um, so that, yeah, the only other scholarship I got, which was really a great experience, it wasn't monetary to help towards tuition, but it was
Mhm.
the diversity scholarship with AIAA. Have they renamed it? Is it still called Diversity
And
Scholarship?
no, it's
Okay, that's what I thought.
yeah. So the work is still being done. It's available to
Mhm.
all students. But the Rising Stars is just
Okay.
all youth that are interested in pursuing an aerospace career.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the time, what it
Mhm.
entailed was I got to go to the Ascend conference
Mhm.
in Las Vegas. Everything was paid for, my flight, my lodging, got to stay in a hotel, and then the food and the registration for the conference. So all of it was paid for. And again, that was in networking, which was really useful. I got to meet other students who I had more long lasting connection with them than any of the other people I met, and
That's great.
um, it didn't turn into a job exactly. I think that sometimes with networking, you have the expectation of, oh, I'm networking in order to get a job from these people.
Oh,
But
yes.
it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't
Mhm.
usually work that way. You're just there to learn and get to know people. And
Building community.
yeah,
You're building your community.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Well, that's great to hear. Yeah. Yeah. So, but that is an encouragement on scholarships so that people who are going to community colleges, do keep an eye open for scholarships for community college students because there are quite a few of them. I know
yeah.
there's a lot of private donors that actually only fund students who are going to community colleges.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
helped me a lot.
Yeah.
I was able to make money the whole time I was in community college. So I got financial aid, so I didn't pay for anything. And then I
Mhm.
had several scholarships through my community college that helped me a lot. I think I was making more through scholarships than through my day job. I think they were comparable. And
Yeah.
so by the time I finished community college, I had a good chunk to start my first few semesters of um, when I transferred to my 4 year university. And then I was working through that as well. And so the semesters that were paid for, I was able to just save up for the following ones. And so, yeah, it was very,
It
very
puts you
helpful.
ahead on that trajectory then, because a lot of students don't have anything saved up for that first year, or they have the first year covered and they don't then have the second year. So it sounds like something that really helped you to stay ahead of the bills, which
Yeah.
for a lot of students I think is what can be the make or break. Um, yeah, definitely. And what about now, very quickly, whatever you're willing to share, want to share, what about housing when you moved to a different area? Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I've been so fortunate my whole journey.
Mhm.
Where I am now, so I interned here last summer, and I was just looking online. It's a site called Furnished Finders, and it's just
Oh, wait, you're on Furnished Finders too? Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay.
yes, that's how I was looking. That's how I found my place. Well, sort indirectly how I found my place. Last year as an intern, there was a lady, and I was applying to lots of different places, and I would give a blurb about who I was and why I needed a lodging
Mhm.
for a couple months. And one lady responded to me in my introduction. I had mentioned that I meal prep to save money, and she messaged me back and she said, I don't share my kitchen. I usually just have people who are staying for a couple nights, and I give them a mini fridge and a microwave in their room, and so they don't need my kitchen. And so I was like, okay, that's understandable. So I kept looking, but then a few days later, she emailed me back and she said, actually, I have a friend from church who seems like she would be a great fit for you. Her great niece, who was 20 at the time, had stayed with her for a summer and she loved having a young lady to stay with her. So I think that she would really like you based off of the
Great.
introduction. And I said, okay. So I stayed with her last summer, and she was just the sweetest lady. And she told me, I'll just be your grandma. It won't be really be like a landlady. Um,
That's awesome.
and yeah, and then I told her at the end of the internship, I said they gave me an offer to come back next year and it would be more permanent. I would just be here long term. Would you be willing to let me stay with you? And I don't know how long it'll be, but I don't have plans of looking for anywhere else. And she said, yeah, I'd love that. So that's where I am now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
live with my landlady. She's so sweet. We have a great time together.
Nice.
Yeah, and I told her I understand if you want your extra bedroom back, but I'm not going to look for a new place until you decide you want your bedroom back. And that's where we are.
That's great. That's wonderful. That's so cool. Yeah, and housing is something that oftentimes students don't think to plan ahead about. So what other fun little nuggets are you? How about work-life balance? What are you doing now for fun?
Yeah, if you're talking about work-life balance, aerospace also scores very highly on that. Aerospace Corporation specifically.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, For fun, I play tennis now, actually. I
Nice.
had never done it before, but my grandpa played tennis, my grandma still plays tennis, my mom played tennis, one of my best friends played
Wow.
tennis when she was younger. Um, and so I thought I'm just gonna do it. So this is another example of the skill my mom taught me. I was riding my bike around my landlady's neighborhood and I saw some tennis courts and one there are two courts. One has a bunch of pickleballers, so many, and the other
So
one had
many.
yeah, the other one had about five guys who were playing tennis. And I still struggle with being shy, but I work on talking to people. So I thought I'm just gonna go up to those group of strangers and ask them, "Can I play too?" So I was really nervous, but I quoted. Um, I don't know if you've seen Winnie the Pooh, the
Oh
old.
gosh, yes.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
love AAML, but
Totally.
the old original cartoon, Owl says to Piglet, "Be brave, little piglet," and I'm not kidding, but I said that to myself all
Oh
the
my
way
God.
as I was walking to the tennis court. I kept repeating it to myself,
Oh, that's fabulous.
and
I love it.
yeah. And so I went on the tennis court and I asked, like, is anyone allowed to be here? Do you have to be part of a club? And they said, no, anyone can be here. And they were like, are you waiting for the tennis court? And I said, well, actually, I've never played, but I want to learn tennis. And they were super nice. One guy said, my wife used to play tennis. She doesn't anymore. So next time he was like, we come here every Saturday, so if you're here next Saturday, I'll bring my wife's old racket and you can have it. And another guy was like, if you stick around till after we finish this match, I'll show you how to hit the ball. So he showed me that. Another guy gave me a few tennis balls to keep. So then the next time I came, um, I just I would watch their match, and then at the end, for the last 15 minutes, they would all teach me. And so I got like 15-minute lessons every Saturday, and then they said, if you want formal lessons, here's the information for a coach. He's super nice. So I reached out to him, and he is very nice. He usually gives me at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, but he only charges me for one.
Wow. That's amazing.
He's amazing. He also gives me homework and he encourages me not to schedule lessons if he can give me homework to practice. He
Okay.
he specifically wants me to not have to spend a lot of money because
Mhm.
he just cares about teaching people.
Yeah.
He teaches kids at the park all the time for free. He'll just do group lessons. So he's one of those people also who's just passionate about the sport. He has a day job. He's a scientist, and so he's not doing it for the money.
Awesome.
Um, yes, and every time I go out to the courts to practice and hit against the ball by myself, inevitably someone shows up, invites me to rally with them, and they often give me a free lesson. There's a group of Filipinos. I'm half Filipino, and they adopted me. They said, "Now you're part of our family," and they said that they would teach me Tagalog, which has been on my list of languages to learn for a long time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Ako
So,
ay pupunta sa Pilipinas.
Oh, I don't even know that much Tagalog. I've just started, but that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That's right on. I
Yeah.
lived in the Philippines. I don't know that I ever shared that, but
Did you live there?
huh?
How long did you live there?
Just for one summer. I did volunteer work for a
Oh,
summer with because a friend of mine from college was from the Philippines.
that's so cool. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Right on. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Didn't mean to get
No,
excited
that's
about
okay. That was the end. So the new things that I'm
wow.
doing, I'm learning tennis. I've just started Tagalog, and then I'm also learning Koine Greek. But those are my
Very cool.
three new things.
That's very cool. The thing that's coming up for me right now, just with hearing your journey, all the things you did before we met and the things that you've learned, and just seeing you um, now and how, being able to witness some more growth since I first met you is just the thing that comes up to mind is just, and you said it once already, is that hope, right? Keeping a positive attitude, having hope, and is something that is so important right now and for every individual. And I just want to say great job in staying positive through all of that and finding your hope in the little things, right? Your journey is all about a lot of little things and a lot of pivots and a lot of adjustments that you made. So valuing the small things and having hope in the small things, I think is pretty meaningful. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anything else you want to add before we finish this formally?
Um, no, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Aaliyah, for taking the time. I think this is going to be really, really meaningful for a lot of students and managers and internships and mentor people. So thank you.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.